thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you nowadays in person because that is how we meet each other nowadays, through Zoom. Why
Yeah,
don't you tell
no,
us tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
yeah. I'm Robert Plotkin. I am a patent attorney at Blue Shift IP, where I help growing tech companies, mainly software and AI companies, obtain intellectual property protection for their innovations. I also help people learn how to leverage AI to be more creative, productive, and innovative when doing things like writing, creating artwork, programming. So I just really love getting immersed in software, AI, and innovation.
Fantastic. I love it. So I want to talk a little bit about the IP side of things because I have about 300 or so, or I'm named on about 300 or so patents that I did for with some of the companies that I work with. And where do you think things are on the IP front today? Because it seems to me that people are, I don't, do they find it less important, or they're not putting as much money into it? Or where do you see that going?
Well, we obviously see companies that are investing significantly in patents, especially small and growing companies. I think it's more important than ever. Look at what happened with OpenAI, creating an incredible platform that tons of companies jumped on. And then as they added more and more features into the OpenAI platform, it made companies that had just gone into business fairly recently somewhat obsolete. Now, you might say
Mm,
those companies didn't have much of a runway anyway, but it's a good example where small, innovative companies, if they don't have intellectual property protection, they run a serious risk of a large, dominant player coming along, looking at the market, looking at what small companies are doing, and saying, oh, look, I like that. I'm just going to add it into my platform
yeah.
uh, and just run that small upstart out of business. So with the pace of innovation being faster than ever before, makes it harder to take advantage of first mover advantage. Patent protection is more important than ever.
Oh, I totally agree with you. I think it's 100% super important for startups to look at it. It's just the problem is that they're looking at shipping, and it's hard for them to see the importance of where the IP lies in it. So how do you convince startups that, hey, this is something you should look at sooner as opposed to later?
We talk to them about the clients of ours who've had success using IP to achieve their goals, meaning
Hmm.
to raise funds, right? When you have patent applications filed, or particularly patents granted quickly, that is something that can attract investment. That's something that perks up the ears of startup founders. You
Right.
can leverage patents to attract acquirers, to raise the value of your company for acquisitions, for raising money. You can use patents to generate direct licensing and other revenue. Those kinds of direct benefits are the things that make people perk up and take notice.
Right. Absolutely. So there is a big difference when it says that we own the patent, or this patent's been granted, or at least is in process. That's a big difference to investors, right?
Huge difference. Because think about it. It's like the difference between buying a house that's already been built and buying a house where the foundation has been laid and the builder says, don't worry, that house is going to be there, next year, right?
That's
Which
right.
would you rather buy? So fortunately, and this is one of the biggest complaints about patents has always been that the process is very slow. By default, it can take a few years to get a software patent granted. There are procedures in place now where you can speed that up very significantly. I have gotten patents granted for some clients in less than a year. I'd
Wow.
love to
That's
do it in
fantastic.
even more quickly than that. I mean, the simplest one is the patent office lets you pay them a small extra fee, and they will put you at the front of the line. But
Nice.
there's a bunch of other programs. There are some for encouraging climate change related technology, cancer related technology that will let you get your patents granted more quickly. And if you can get that patent granted in a year and a half, while it's still highly relevant to the market, it can be a big benefit to you.
Wow, I did not know that. I thought that we were still looking at 2 to 3+ years out. I didn't realize that there was sort of a fast track now. That's fantastic.
Yeah, they actually call it the fast track or track one. at the patent office. There's other things you can do. I won't go into all the details, but if you get a version of the patent granted in another country, you can then speed up examination in the US, and there's a whole range of procedures like that.
Oh, nice, nice. So there's really no excuse for startup founders not to go, wait a minute, I should protect this.
Yeah, absolutely, because otherwise they have to ask, and the investors will always ask them, what's your moat, right? What's your protection against the competitor coming along, seeing your bright idea and saying, that looks nice, I'll do that too. And there are other answers to that in business, right? It's not only intellectual property, but patents, trade secrets, copyright to a lesser extent in the case of software and AI can all be a really significant moat or barrier that at least raises the cost to someone else of trying to copy what you're doing.
Right. So there was a period of time with the Alice decision that it was difficult to get software patents. Is it a lot easier now?
It's swung back quite a bit. And as long as the technology that you have is not what's classified as a business method, which is usually things that relate to calculating prices or salaries of people, any method that deals with money. Other than that, things have gotten a lot easier again to obtain a software patent. As long as the technology is really new, it's an advance over the state of the art, and it does something useful, you can get a patent granted in the US. I'm not saying it's easy. That's why you come to someone like me or my firm, particularly because the procedures at the patent office that you have to follow are very arcane and specialized. But it's gotten a lot easier again in the 10 plus years or so since that Alice decision.
So if somebody wants to go ahead and do it on their own, you don't recommend that, right? Not just because you're looking for business, it's because it's a lot more complicated than it was.
Yeah, unfortunately, although you can get a patent granted on your own, in almost all cases, that patent will be pretty worthless.
Mm,
In other words, the patent office will grant it to you. And then if you try to enforce that patent, I'll tell you, you will find it will probably be impossible to enforce. Either it'll be very easy for a competitor to invalidate it, or what I found is that when companies write their own patents or individual inventors write their own patents, they're so narrow
mm.
that another company can create a slightly different version of the invention and not infringe the patent. And that's why the patent is essentially worthless.
Right.
So
So it's
that's why you need to come to an expert.
right. So it's important enough to make it broad enough so that it can be you can detect infringement.
Absolutely. It's broad enough that you can detect infringement, broad enough that you can enforce infringement. And similarly, that when you go to an investor in advance, the investor will look at this patent and say, oh, I can see this patent covers a lot more than just what your products are. It covers maybe what your competitors' products are, what your competitors' products will be in the next 5 years. That breadth, that scope of protection is really valuable. It's, again, what makes a patent broader than a copyright, which would just cover what's in your code.
So do you guys work with the startup founders to say, okay, here's your core idea, we'll protect that, but then here's how we could expand it to cover off those additional areas, or do you send them back and go, hey, you need to expand it along these lines?
No, that's a core part of what we do, is we work with them. We learn from them about what their own product development plans are, where they see their industry heading, which takes a little bit of crystal ball gazing. It's
Mm,
not perfect, but we have a lot of experience working with clients doing that. And then we add in our own significant experience just generalizing in various ways when it comes to software and AI. And we put that all together to obtain patents that are as broad as we can possibly make them, while still satisfying all the legal requirements.
right. So since you mentioned AI, is it more or less likely that your patent's going to be granted if it has an AI component?
Well, it's a very interesting question. What I've been finding is that the patent office has been much less likely to just reject AI inventions out of hand for being
Mm,
what they call too abstract or not technological enough, which
right.
we sometimes see with other types of software patents. So that's good. And otherwise, an AI patent is really as likely to get granted as anything else. It just has to be new and
Right.
different enough
Got to
from
build
what
from
else.
novelty, usefulness, all of the standard patent requirements.
Yeah, and non-obviousness, which is an interesting one for the people who aren't familiar with that term. It means you have to show that your invention goes beyond the state of the art. It goes beyond what an ordinary person in your field would have thought of developing. And as AI is fueling innovation, it's really raising the bar for non-obviousness, making it harder to get patents, but at the same time, it's enabling people to rise above that bar.
Mhm.
Both things are happening simultaneously.
So you find that I think AI is inspiring people to come up with those new ideas because you can't. I mean, I remember reading that in the UK it was struck down that AI cannot own patents. I think it was the DICUS, or I forget the name of that. DBIS,
Dabas.
DABUS, that's it. And I thought that was really interesting because I have a feeling we're already at that point where AI can look at the white spaces between the patents and come up with ideas in that space. But the AI can't own it, and I'm assuming that we haven't seen any rulings in the United States yet on that topic.
No, we have. There's been quite
Oh,
a
we have.
few countries.
Okay.
The US as well has said that AI cannot be named as an inventor
Hmm.
on a patent. And I've written a few things. I'm actually very soon I'll be publishing an article which is going to be specifically about why AI can be patented, even though it can't be named as an inventor on a
Hmm.
patent. Because
Yeah.
you stated it absolutely correctly, but I've seen other people draw the conclusion that because AI can't own or be an inventor on a patent, that means you can't patent AI innovations, and
Yeah.
that's not true. You just have to identify one or more human inventors, which, in my opinion, is always the case. Now, maybe there'll come a future day when AI will be so autonomous, it will just on its own become motivated to invent something new and will do it. And there will be truly no human inventor.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're there. We're there now. And the other thing that I've argued is that there's really no reason to give AI inventor status, because the whole reason for patents is to give people an incentive to put their energy into inventing and to disclose things to the public. And AI does not need that incentive. It doesn't respond to incentives. It doesn't decide to invent because it's going to earn money as a result of that, like humans do. So there's just no point in naming AI as inventors, and yet you can still patent AI-related innovation. Let me just break it down to three categories briefly. One would be new types of AI, new machine learning training algorithms, for example. That would be one. Another would be inventions that have AI in them. So a chatbot, right? It
Right.
has an AI in it. And then the third thing would be, and I find this particularly interesting, inventions that were developed using AI. So the Dabas cases had a patent on a beverage container that the human inventor said was created by software. So that's AI generated inventions. All three of those potentially patentable.
Right. But here's where the human input is taken into account, because there's got to be a prompt. That initial prompt comes from a human. So if you think about it, it's almost like any other design tool. I could go to any design tool and say, hey, I want to design a cylindrical object which could be a drink holder, right? And your initial input is the ownership, right? Is leads back to the ownership. You're the person who put the prompt in the first place. So whatever it spits out at the other end is yours.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that is who the inventor is. It's just like a hammer in a sense. Now, it's like a hammer, but it's not just like a hammer. The interesting thing
Yeah,
about AI is that there's a lot that goes on internally in an automated way in
exactly.
between your prompt and what comes out the other end. What comes out the other end might actually surprise you as the human inventor, which is unlike a hammer. But it's actually quite similar to chemical inventions, where I have just a high school understanding of chemistry. But you take sodium, right, and chlorine, you put them together, you heat them, and you get table salt. And
Yeah.
maybe the first person who did that was totally shocked at the fact that what came out of these two poisonous, dangerous elements was something edible. But if you were the first person to do that, and then you recognize that what came out was useful, and you could identify the structure of it, you could obtain a patent on it,
Hmm.
even though you were surprised at the output. And maybe
Yeah.
nature was what acted in the equivalent way to how AI is acting now. So in that regard, it's nothing new for patent law to enable a human to put something into some complex system, get a result out that surprises them, and still patent the result.
Yeah. So it works like any other tool as long as the end result is something that is patentable.
So absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So would you say that you're seeing a lot more filings with a lot of AI in them now, or is it still more human generated?
What I'm seeing is a lot more filings involving systems that incorporate AI into them to
Mm,
perform some function. So if there was a system that already was using natural language processing in some way, the inventors are saying, well, let's put in a large language model in
mhm.
that component, or substitute a large language model in for some other previous technology because it does such a good job,
Right.
or replace several different components with one large language model because they can be good general purpose tools. So I'm seeing a lot more of that. I'm not seeing as much of inventions created using AI. I'm definitely seeing a lot of new training methods, and I'm seeing a little bit of work being put into speeding up the execution of trained models. There's a
Mm,
lot of incentive right now to do that, to be able to speed up, how quickly GPT can process a prompt to produce an output. Just
right.
imagine if that could be sped up by 1 million times,
Oh
let's
yeah.
say, what you
Phenomenal.
could
I,
do
I
with
wish you
it.
could do that today because mine's super slow. But what about resource requirements? Are you seeing anything that's on the resource farm? Because I know these things are ridiculously resource intensive.
Yeah, I have. In fact, on what I mentioned regarding speeding up processing time, some of how that's being done is to do things like compress the models. I mean, I'm sure you've seen just generally publicly already in the last year, there was from the shift towards look at what large language models can do. In the last few months, a lot of people are saying, hey, what about smaller language models?
Hmm.
Do we need
Hmm.
a large language model for everything?
Yeah.
Really? Or what are the situations in which a much smaller language model would do? And once it's smaller, it doesn't just take up less memory, it can be processed with less computing resources. So I'm definitely seeing that too.
Hmm. Hmm. So you're finding that people are generally understanding how generative AI works and the best uses for it, or do you think it's still a ways off? I mean, it's only been out for about a year or so. A lot of people have latched onto it, but do you think it's in the general consciousness it's still a little bit behind?
Yeah, I think it is a bit behind. Look, there's different categories of people. A lot of our clients are very sophisticated engineers and technologists who have been working with this type of technology for a long time. They are ahead of the curve, but even some of them are, were taken a little bit by surprise around a year ago and are now
Yeah.
working to incorporate the latest into what they're doing. Then there's a lot of other people, and I'll say lawyers, for example. I mean, generative AI is being used in the practice of law. A lot of lawyers, I would say,
It's
were
been writing
blind.
arguments, it's doing all sorts of things. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So in that context, there's a lot of people who I would say have seen it, they've tried it, but they're not really attempting to use it. And then there's others who are doing what they can to adopt it and be responsible. As a lawyer, one of the things we need to make sure to do is preserve client confidentiality and privilege.
Mm,
And the public nature of a lot of the products like ChatGPT has been a real impediment to that. But there have been, in the last few months in particular, products being released that address those concerns. And I think we'll see more and more of that in the very, very near future.
so you guys don't have your own LLM on
We do
premise?
have, we do
Okay,
have, no, I
perfect.
wouldn't say our own that we've trained, but we have
Mm,
access. we have access to at least one product that is confidentiality and privilege preserving, so that we can use it in legal work.
Nice. So it's even streamlined your own work. That's great.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we absolutely are using it. And in doing so, we have to pay attention to all of the, what's being called the jagged frontier, right? Which is that it does some things incredibly well. It does some things very, very poorly. I'd say so poorly, I don't even try to use it for them. And then it does other things, sometimes well, sometimes not, in surprising, inconsistent ways, so that it's really important to develop your own practices and work habits to take advantage of the benefits without getting burned by those weaknesses.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, I just did a show today that I posted today about how they're looking at hallucinations as actual creativity. So that's how AI is creative, by hallucinating, because we look at it, we go, you're crazy, you're nuts, but it could actually create something new and interesting and creative, which, who knows, may eventually be patentable, right?
It's absolutely true. So you mentioned Davis. The person behind Davis is someone named Stephen Thaler. I wrote a book about computer generated inventions and the whole process of automating invention back. It was published in 2009.
Wow.
And
prescient.
I interviewed Dr. Stephen Thaler for that book starting around 2006, 2007. He had an earlier version called the Creativity Machine. And the way that worked was to have two different neural networks. And one of them he called it, I think, dreaming at the time rather than hallucinating, but it did exactly what you did. It had enough randomness in it that you could give it a bunch of parameters for something like toothbrush bristles, which is a real example at the time, and it would vary the parameters in semi-random but controlled ways to come up with new designs. And it has, as you say, in that context, being able to brainstorm or hypothesize is a real benefit when you're trying to invent things. Because then if you have something else, which he had, which then evaluated the outputs, you've got the generation, you got the evaluation, and you do that in a feedback loop. I mean, that's what human inventors do a lot of. And it can be really hard to do the brainstorming part. And so we really, in the right context, as you said, can benefit from the hallucinations. Not, though, when you're trying to do a search for a legal precedent and you need the exact right answer.
Exactly right. But you think about it, if you could have these machines dreaming and evaluating at the same time, it could be churning out hundreds of thousands of patents a minute or something like that if it was powerful enough, or patentable ideas.
Yeah. Right, patentable ideas. And then what you would need to do is have a way to evaluate them. It's kind of similar to drug trials, where you need to be able to demonstrate efficacy, right, before you could really file a patent application and get it granted and have it satisfy the legal requirements. But you absolutely could be doing that kind of thing.
Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool. So it's time to think like a futurist. It's the year 20. Oh, it's a 2034 now. Wow. So where do you think we're going to be in 10 years? Where do you think that the industry is going to be? Where AI, where do you think patents are going to be in 10 years? That's interesting to me. I can't imagine. With AI and all these things going on, it's disrupting everything.
Yeah,
every
it
intellectual
is.
trait. Yeah.
Things are moving so quickly. 10 years, seems like it's probably going to be 1,000 years. I would suspect with AI that it will be so integrated into everything that we may not even refer to it as something separate anymore. You know how in the early days of the internet, right, everyone was calling their company this, that, this.com to call
you can tell the age of a company based on what it's named, right?
And then everybody became an internet company, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, so it didn't make sense to distinguish internet from non-internet companies.
Yeah.
The same is going to be true with AI, probably in a lot less than 10 years from now. It's going to be integrated into the work that I think just about everyone does, even if they're not a technologist. So lawyers are a good example. Lawyers are not people as a whole, we're an exception, but who like to be early adopters or use technology or even change the processes they use. It will of necessity have to become integrated into the law, because the people who don't do that will be just out-competed by the people who do. It's going to be pure supply and demand. And the clients, I think, are going to demand it. And clients are going to have an increasing ability to engage in self-service, right? They'll have legal tools available to answer a lot of their basic questions, maybe even do basic tasks. So the
Mm,
question is going to be, what is it that a lawyer or a law firm will have to offer that goes above and beyond what a client could get on their own, just using an AI tool? And what, as a high end lawyer, can you offer that the average lawyer can't offer just using AI? And that's going to have to be increasingly going up the ladder of complexity, skill, experience, and strategic wisdom, I think, is what you're going to have to be able to offer as a lawyer, any kind of service professional, to be able to convincingly make the case it's valuable enough for you to hire me, that you're going to get something that's worth it out, instead of just getting this done on your own using some combination of AI and lower skilled people.
yeah, because right at this point, I mean, you do need that human to touch things before they go on, right? Because you can't just create a patent application and then just submit it in AI and hope that it's going to get approved.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a few tools out there now that are specific, patent specific AI drafting tools, and
Hmm.
I've used some of them. I'm actually just signed up for a demo of another one. I'm sure over the next year or two, more and more of them will come out. But the first market for them is patent lawyers,
Yeah,
not inventors and tech companies directly. So I
right.
think that's at least the first stage, is that all of these tools, same thing in the medical industry. The first users are going to be doctors and medical professionals. But who knows? When did you say 2034?
2034.
Yeah.
By then we'll all
Who
be obsolete and be on a beach somewhere. I don't know.
yeah, who knows what's going to be available on the consumer side of things, right?
Yeah,
Will you be able to, you'll have to probably still go somewhere to get an MRI done, right? But will you be able to just then get the image and run a consumer grade product to
right.
get the diagnosis?
Yeah.
Probably within that 10 years, if not much less.
Yeah. If not, it'll probably be more like I go get my MRI and then everything, the diagnosis is done completely by AI. And then they just sent me a text saying, hey, everything's okay. And the doctor's
Right.
completely out of the loop because it hit all the proper markers. I mean, there's so in the next 10 years, so much is going to change because of this power. And like you said, it's going to be completely integrated into things and it's going to push things back down to individuals, but you're still going to need that human touch in certain areas. Otherwise, we're gonna lose a lot in the translation, I think.
Oh yeah, and then the other thing is it's really hard to predict what new problems we'll need to start solving, and therefore what new skills and what new services are going to come into demand. I think people often
Right.
think of the demand or as or the supply of services as being fixed. Oh, and AI is just going to swallow all that up.
Yeah.
But from looking at the history of technology, right? We as humans start tackling the next higher level of problem when
Yeah.
that occurs. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. And that's just so hard to predict what those are going to be and whether there'll ever be an end to that.
Yeah. Well, it's like if, for me personally, AI hasn't actually reduced my workload. It's actually allowed me to do 10 times as much. Right.
Right.
So I think that's what human beings are going to end up doing. They're going to be just doing more as opposed to doing less and going, well, why am I still working? Right.
Right. I mean, one job description I like to look at over the last 50, 80 years is secretary, right? You can say that
Hmm.
was someone who originally was writing notes on by hand,
Yep.
then typing documents, then
Yep.
photocopying them. Now a secretary is basically what an office manager would have
Yep.
been 50 or 60 years ago, doing event planning, travel arrangement. I mean, they're doing, as you said, a much larger amount of higher level work.
Yep.
The job is still there. It's just transformed radically to do more high level work.
Yeah, and it's going to be the same for all of these. And see, that's the thing. Whenever we're on the front end of these things, there's always people clamoring, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world! AI is going to take all of our jobs." And then it's every technological event like this. We're at the before it, it's like it's the worst thing ever. After it's like, "Oh my God!" We have so many more jobs. We have so much more to do. It's like go back to 1991 and try to be a web designer. People are like, what does that have something to do with spiders? I mean, come on. It's crazy. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can go to robertplotkin.com if you want to learn how to leverage AI to be more creative, productive, and innovative. And you can go to blueshiftip.com if you're looking for patent and intellectual property protection for your technology. You can always check me out on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Robert Plotkin. I post tons of free stuff about AI and innovation there all the time.
Fantastic. And startup founders, do not wait. Get that IP in.
Thank you so much.
All right, sir. Talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye.